We're here to talk through this LITS puzzle by Bahar. It has a pretty simple start, but then runs quickly into some much more challenging areas. One of the things that's true is a lot of the regions in this puzzle have a one-wide snake shape, which means you can always fill in the middle when there are only as many as 7 cells in the region. Then having filled in some of these pieces, you'll see in adjacent regions where it's impossible to shade some of these groups because you're going to form 2 by 2 shaded groups, and then we form similar, smaller sized regions that come back in and force more of the puzzle to be shaded. Let's see, there are these 3 here. This whole eye shape, which also excludes a set of cells near it. This whole L shape. Nothing here. You can do some subtle things. Forming this would form another L. Stuff like that. Shading this cell actually would form another L, so let's mark that off. Up here in this corner, if this is used, it forms an issue, basically a 2 by 2 block. If this is shaded, it will have to be a straight down. Can't use this cell, so that's another I. This would be another I. So we get a starting point like this, and this was a pretty key cell to mark as unusable, and you'll see why is that one of the things that drives the solve of this puzzle is connectivity overall. And this I group, you might want to try to connect down below to these 3 regions. If it were to be connected, it would have to use these 3 cells, and it can't use this one. And we already see it also can't use this one, so this can't connect to this coming through this rightmost side. And consequently, we then know that it has to come through the top and connect through this cell. These will have to come together. It can't be an I shape, so it's going to use this, and it's going to come like so. Here's a place I'll pause and just give a kind of meta comment. In a competition segment, we would mark this as a uniqueness opportunity, where there's a fact that this can't have a unique solution as a whole puzzle, where right now it can have an L or S shape unless this spot is an L. And so in a competition, I would skip ahead right now and actually mark that this is an S, this is an L, that forces this is an I, and this is an S. And you get sort of quick propagation across the top of the puzzle, but I can't do that by logic unless you assume that we've never made an error on our site and had a puzzle with multiple answers. But I just wanted to call attention to this. Not that we like to have many puzzles that have these spots, but when we have a rare one that does have the potential to sort of show you sort of how a speed solver will see issues that force a puzzle to have exactly one answer. In this case, this forming an S and this forming an L. It's a concept of how to use uniqueness for speed solving. We're going to not think about that anymore. We're going to do a logical path to get to the end, but I just wanted to bring it up. Talked about how the upper right piece will connect, and now it's important to think about these 3 regions, this F, this larger shape, and this L, how these regions connect. And one thing to ask is, does it use the center at all, or does it use this larger outer frame? There are 2 important regions to think about right now, this large group in the middle and this outer frame. And if it used the outer frame to connect and never touch the center, the most extreme point it can take to get to the side is this, and the outer frame could take as many as 4 cells. It would need 6 to get all the way over here. And so one thing to see is that the center region is somehow going to be connecting to this side. So some set of the cells that are in this kind of bounded group I just marked will be used. And on the very extreme, right now at least, one thing you can do is mark that cells like these can never be touched. We'll have to have some part of the connecting group over on this side. We can do something stronger than that, though, is like even on this extreme, like say that the most extreme part of the shaded group was here, like the center region starting from here doesn't really reach into any part of this puzzle. even the center region being here is the one way you could get to this tetromino shape with either this or this. But if you see this L doesn't use this, it pushes another L, an L with an L with an L, this would be a very bad region. And so this is really not where the connection is coming to reach this part of the puzzle. This cell in this direction doesn't have enough to get it over to this side of the puzzle, and this is too far away. So the actual cells that are part of connecting back to the center of the grid are coming from this region, and at least from these cells. We can actually see we don't shade all the way down, because that would be another L if this was used. We want to be able to say something a little stronger than that, though. So say that this cell is not used here. This is the last shaded cell. That forces this set of 4 to be all used. And for connectivity, this set of 4 will all be used, and now an I is touching an I. And so what you can do by logic, and it's tricky, is to say that for this lower right section of 3 regions to connect to the whole puzzle, it's got to use a center, which we just showed, and specifically it has to connect through this cell that I've circled. And once we have that, there's a lot we can do to work through the rest of the puzzle. This has to stay connected but can't be an L, so it's going to be this I shape. The connection to the center region is going to use one set of these cells. It's going to connect up to here, and it can actually connect through any of these 3 cells, but in doing so, we now also specifically know it's not going to be using some of the things I'm marking off. And one thing that does is you see it now, like this bottom part of the puzzle is really isolated, so it's got to connect to this L. There's no way the outer frame gives it enough room to reach. So it's like this. We similarly see it now, this S tetromino with all these center cells marked off and this marked off. This is also isolated, needs to use this outer region to connect back in. If it started from the cell, it wouldn't get all the way out, so the outer region has to use this lower left part of the puzzle. And it's going to take either this cell or this cell, and then take these 3. With this connection through the center, what we now see is we have a dividing line, just where I'm marking with my hand. These are all unused, and that forces exactly the cell to be taken to keep connected. That's the cell we talked about before had to be an L, so now we actually have, by logic, gotten to this point. This now limits the cell we take to connect through the middle to be these. That means it can't be this one, it has to come through this one, it can't use this one, that would be 2 L's. This would be L to S to I. This L forces this, which forces this, still working on connectivity. This whole set has to come down. This region is isolated unless this cell is taken, so we have to take it. L touching S. This still needs to be connected, so this cell is used. This still needs to be connected. This cell is used. We're going to need to connect down to one of these 2 cells, and that will connect with the tetromino uses one of these 2 cells as well. If this top cell is used, which forms an L here, it cancels this as an option from a 2x2 rule. And then when we use this cell, we will connect in with either an L shape, that'd be L touching L, that's no good, or S touching S is no good. And so the subtle exclusion is that this bottom has to take this cell to be an I, that uses this cell, and the last option is shaded in to form this completed puzzle. It's a tricky LITS. It has, while it has some pretty simple region shapes on the extremes, the effects of this large outer frame and the effect of the large central region are things you really have to think through to get through the puzzle. The way we got through it was to first identify on this right side that this upper region doesn't connect to the bottom. We did that by seeing how these cells were really not usable, and then by recognizing this has to connect through the center big F shape region. Getting that this cell is the exact one it connects through was critical. So we hope by giving you some examples of harder connectivity and even talking a little bit about how to use uniqueness for speed solving, you learned some tricks that are used in LITS puzzles by some of the best solvers in the world. We'll see you again soon.